Well, you guys have a great team back there, rushing around, especially with the emergencies that they had going on. We weren't sure if this is going to work, and even if it doesn't, it does have some pictures for you to see. I know that pictures help paint that image. I will have to say, though, that the video that you guys had was very cool. You didn't get to see it, but because of the internet issues, everyone on stage was a ghost. So you could see the slides moving, but nobody was up here. And so I don't know if I'm a ghost right now, too. That would be really awesome and a great story to tell. I am? Oh, I'm good. Oh, that's unfortunate. That would have been fun to talk about. But for those of you who are on the worship team, you did a great job, but no one saw you. I don't know if that makes you feel any better, but it was fun to watch for a little while. Yeah, we are at the Native American Christian Academy. Has anyone ever heard of that before today? Okay, a few. Anybody remember when it was Sun Valley Indian School? Okay, I'm really going to ask you to give your age here. Anybody remember when it was Twin Wells Indian School? Okay, a couple of you. I need to let you know that it's the same school. There's been some confusion about that over the years. We are the same school. We are a K through 12. I call us a hybrid school with a boarding option. Boarding schools, residential schools have a very negative connotation right now. However, if you talk to our families, you'll realize that boarding schools are an absolute necessity, especially among the rural tribes. So we work in the Four Corners, the First Nations of the Four Corners. In the state of Arizona alone, we have 22 tribes. And we're trying to do work among the big five, which are the Navajo, Apache, Hopi, Ute, and Zuni. That's not to discredit the other tribes that are there. It's just those are the big five in our area. And so how many teachers do we have here? Okay, a few teachers and students, some of our kids. Okay, how would you guys like to live with your teachers? Or teachers, how would you like to live with your students all the time? Yeah, that's how my staff and students feel. So you can imagine how uncomfortable that makes this conversation. But I want to talk about not only about our school, but about what missions does and why today is so incredibly important. We had been in Spain about a month. I didn't know Spanish. I didn't speak Spanish before we went. But we went over there to start our commissioned missionary journey. And we lived where Nazarene missionaries had always lived, there in the city of Madrid, in a small apartment above the Nazarene church. My wife was fluent. She already knew Spanish, and so that was a great help. We came down on Sunday morning for the Sunday morning worship service, and a man named Ruben came up to me speaking Spanish just as fast as he could. I had no idea what he was saying, but shook my head pretending to understand while desperately trying to get my wife's attention to come over and translate for him. After making me wait what seemed like forever, she finally came up, started translating, and I understood what Ruben wanted to say. He said, "Josh, there's a Spanish tradition that I want you to be a part of, and I want to take you there. It's called running with the bulls." So you've heard of it. He said, "I'm going to pull up early in the morning and we're going to go." And so true to his word, he shows up early. I get into his car and off we go to the southern Madrid suburb of Leganés. We get there early, but we're already a little late as the streets are already packed. We finally find a place to park. We get out of the vehicle and we take our place there along the barricaded road. Now, for those of you who don't know what running with the bulls is, there's one trail that winds through the city streets, barricades on both sides, and then those brave souls who want to can climb over that barricade and get into the road and run from the bulls. Now, like I said, I'd only been there a month, and so I had my video camera. I wanted to video this historic event, at least a historic event for me. And as I'm standing there with Ruben, we start seeing the guys climb over the barricade and get into the road, and they begin their stretches and get all excited for the run that's about to happen. Now, at this time, Ruben knows that I don't speak Spanish, so he starts dictating a phrase to me. I have no idea what he's saying and indicate that I have no idea what he's saying, so he begins to repeat the phrase, speaking louder and slower, because that always works when someone doesn't understand a language. But after repeating the phrase over and over again, I finally am able to piece together what he says. He says, "Josh, you should run." Now, I didn't know a lot about running with the bulls, but I did know a little bit. I knew that you don't necessarily need to be faster than the bulls. You just need to be faster than, yeah, at least someone else. right? So I began to look at the guys who were in the road, and I determined that there were at least a couple of those young men that I felt like I could outrun. And so it didn't take much convincing as I hand my camera off to Ruben, and I also cross over that barricade, and now I'm in the road. I'll be honest with you, we didn't actually see the bulls coming. We heard the gate go crashing up, and the bulls come out, and the people behind us screaming, and that was good enough for me and my crew as we began running just as fast as we can. Now, I really wish I would have known Spanish, because then I could have asked Ruben, what happens at the end of the race? How does this all end? I didn't know. I never watched enough of those videos to really understand what happens. And as we run down the streets, we finally get to the bullfighting arena. Apparently this is where it ends. We all go pouring into there, and I watch as most of the men climb over the 6-foot wooden wall and take their place in the stands. But only a few men remain in the arena. I figured, well, we had had such an easy time outrunning the bulls. How hard could this second part be? And I decided that I too was going to just stand in the sand of that arena as those bulls finally come in. And they begin to chase us all over that arena. A bull would pick a group of us and take off running, and we'd go running right in front of him, and we'd haul ourselves over that wooden wall as the bull would come crashing into it, turning around, going to chase other people. It was fun for a while. But I started to read the crowd and realized that what really got the crowd pumped there in Madrid, Spain, was when you got really close to the bull. I was a new missionary, and I figured, well, if I'm going to be able to present the gospel of Christ, maybe it would be great to have a platform to do that. And if that's what gets the crowd going, well, then I'm going to attempt it myself. I chose my victim. There was a bull who was standing still in the middle of that arena, and I knew that if I was going to sneak up on a bull, it had to be one that wasn't moving. And so I began my march, sneaking up behind that bull, getting closer and closer. I look as that bull is there. There are two Spanish men standing equal distance apart, creating a triangle with that bull, and he's eyeing both of them, trying to decide which one of them deserves it most. I should have told those two young men what my plan was, but I didn't. I get within 10 feet of the back of that bull, and those two young men run off in opposite directions, the bull chasing neither one of them. He hears me behind him. I decide that I'm not going to wait around and see what happens. I don't know bulls that well, and so I went ahead and turned around and started running a direction. Unfortunately, the bull had the same plan that I did, and unfortunately chose the same direction that I was running. I started to watch for that wall, the wall that I had climbed over many times before. I saw the Spanish men who were standing around it. I saw them to motion me to run just a little bit faster than I was currently running, and then I watched as they began to hide their eyes. Now, I had already climbed over this wooden wall several times, and I knew that this time, with the fear of God himself propelling me, that I would be able to just clear it. And I take that one final leap, and I make it exactly halfway over that wall. The bull decides I need a little bit of help. He puts his horn in the bottom of my shoe and flips me the rest of the way. I come to on the other side as Spanish men begin to pick me up, dust me off, and say horrible things about Americans on that day. I tell you that story for a couple of reasons, to let you know that when we participate in the Great Commission of Christ, often we have really great stories to tell. I also tell you this because when you give to Faith Promise, when you participate in the World Evangelism Fund, some of that money goes for missionary health insurance. So let's keep promoting that. Whenever I talk about Faith Promise or what giving to missions looks like, it's really important for me to let you know that I have seen ways that your giving has mattered. And I don't know if you fully understand what your Faith Promise does, what participation in the World Evangelism Fund, all that it goes to do. And we're going to see if this works. I don't know if it... Okay. Okay, right on. So this is just to walk you through really quickly. There are some words here. Most of this is probably things that you understand. That your alabaster dollars, when you give to alabaster, and I heard that announcement today, that you probably know that a lot of this goes to buy land, that it's used to construct churches and schools and medical facilities. Maybe you know this, maybe you don't, that even the alabaster funds go to provide housing for missionaries and for national workers that are there in the field. And I will say that during our time in the mission field in Spain, well, even in Guatemala, then in Spain and Greece, Romania and Italy, all the places that we have lived have been places that have been provided because of participation in Alabaster. I can't tell you all those stories or else we'd be here all day. Does anybody want to be here all day? Well, that's insulting. No, don't feel bad. But I will tell you some of the stories from the last place where we spent any considerable time. That was in Romania. This is the missionary house there in the city of Bucharest. We actually lived in the city of Brașov. So this building that was purchased with Alabaster funds, we began to pray about what God wanted us to do. We used this as a training facility for theological education. We watched as 5 ordained elders in the Church of the Nazarene in Romania received their education, became ordained because of the studies that were done here. But using Alabaster funds, we were also able to realize that this building, after everyone had been ordained, and we were able to do classes in another part of the country, that this house today is a second house for survivors of human trafficking, where girls who had been rescued, as they graduated out of the program, were able to find a new place to live, a place that puts them closer to the city, where they're able to find jobs, where they're out of the reach of their traffickers, a place that is hidden, but now is used to do ministry in a much different way. Alabaster funds have been used for our church in Sighișoara, where Romanians and Romas are able to come together and minister. Our church there in the town of Sighișoara that ministers to the Roma Gypsy community, and many of these girls are the ones who are targeted for trafficking. This church also built and purchased with Alabaster funds, where even this morning a church is meeting right after saying goodbye to a work and witness team that was there. We have been able to understand through our ministry, even there at Native American Christian Academy, just how important Alabaster funds are. In all the places where we live, having a place where we can worship together is the most important thing. There at our school, we have a 4-pronged approach to our vision. We're going to educate our students, engage our families, empower our community, but all of that is done to encounter our Creator. I want you to know that whenever you participate in Alabaster, whenever you provide those funds, it is what helps us to be able to have the structures that we need to share the gospel of Christ, where the body of Christ all over the world can come together. I know we talk about it just being the change that's in our pockets, but I want you to know that real change is happening every time that you participate in Alabaster funds. Then maybe you know, maybe you don't know, that part of Faith Promise and the World Evangelism Fund is also your physical participation in Work and Witness. You probably know that this is mostly construction teams that come together, that there have been over 150,000 people involved, and that there have been over 5,000 years of donated labor from all of those who have been participating. But we have been able to see just how important Work and Witness has been for us in the country of Romania. An apartment building owned by the church in Sighișoara is a source of income there. Realizing that there are people from the community who have gathered into this location. The church charges them rent, but to be honest, most of the people there can't pay it. The church runs it anyway. A building that has been improved because of Work and Witness teams who decided to invest in the lives of people in that community. While we were there, we found out that there was a brother and sister. The sister was 11 years old. We imagined that she was living there with her family because she would always come to church and all to our children's programs. And we started to notice that she was dirtier and dirtier every time that she came. And so we decided to go check up on her. She was living there on the top floor on the left-hand side. Once we got to her apartment, we realized that her parents had been gone. We didn't know for how long they had been there. And inside of her living room, the living room was filled with acorns, going up about 4 feet high. Something that her and her brother had gone into the bear-infested woods there in Transylvania to collect those in order to sell them. This is how she was taking care of her little brother. When we realized this, we knew that we needed to do something to help provide for the community. And it was only through the participation of Work and Witness that we were able to make that happen. In many parts of our ministries in Romania, we have been able to cultivate the land, to start greenhouses, to be able to take care of our people that are there, offering clothing and food to the community. Work and Witness teams helping us to be able to provide for this. Even the construction of a new house for our survivors of human trafficking. A third place where the girls who are in desperate need of protection can come. A place that is completely off the grid in the middle of a field surrounded by just a few houses. Working with these girls, we began to realize that many of their traffickers were patrolling the streets, just looking for them if they were taking a walk or out with their friends. We knew that we needed to have a place that was outside of the city, where those who were in desperate need of protection could go. One of the girls that came to us was rescued off the abortion table. We found out later that one of her traffickers was a police officer in Bucharest. It really made what we were trying to do a lot more difficult. We'd always been working with the police to be able to provide a safe place for these survivors. We would get the call from them and know that they needed to have a place to live, and all of a sudden now that operation was in jeopardy. This is when we knew that a place like this was absolutely necessary. It would have been impossible to do by ourselves. But because of the participation in Faith Promise, the World Evangelism Fund, and because of your participation and work and witness around the globe, we were able to make sure that things were built for them. We've been able to see the importance even at our school. All of the improvements that we have made over this last year, renovating our classrooms, our dorms, getting everything ready for the new school year was only possible because of the participation of work and witness teams from churches just like yours who decided that they had something to give to the Great Commission of Christ. We've also used work and witness not just for building, but in every country where we lived, we've been able to do sports, teaching baseball and American football to kids who had never played those sports before, giving us an opportunity to build inroads, not only with Greeks, but also with refugees who had come into that country, not only with Romanians, but Roma gypsies, working in one community where 100% of those kids had been trafficked. We have been able to be the hands and feet of Jesus, even through creative outlets, through work and witness, all because you decided to participate on days just like this to be a part of the Great Commission work. After that, we have Nazarene Compassionate Ministries. We are an NCM project there in Sun Valley, a place where kids can come and be able to experience all of these. In fact, in many of the countries where we have served, this has been an important part of what we do, making sure that physical needs are taken care of for the children who are there. A lot of these are things that you probably know. I won't read all of these, mostly because I just want to get to the stories that we share. There in Romania, up in the northern part of Transylvania, we have an NCM that ministers specifically to the needy of that community. They have found that when they started with education, that it wasn't just education that they needed to provide there, that there were a lot of needs within that community. A lot of those groups that had just been forgotten about, that had been forsaken by the people around them. We realized that the kids there had no place to eat, that many of them were going home to families where mom and dads weren't there. A lot of the dads had gone to find work in other parts of Europe, leaving mom home alone. She also felt like that she needed to work. Some of those moms had also been trafficked, leaving our kids to go and fend for themselves and find a way into our NCM project there in the town of Sighișoara. We also realized that there was another group that had been forsaken, a group of those with special needs, a group that no one cared about. They were seen as a mistake for their family. They didn't really want to take them out in public. They didn't want to have them have any type of interaction. They needed a place. And so our Nazarene Compassionate Ministry Center decided to open up its doors where a special needs group could meet twice a week to be able to come together, have activities, learn about Jesus, to know that they were loved and cared for, only possible because of the participation of NCM there. We also realized that the elderly were another group that were completely forgotten about. As their families move on into the larger cities of Romania or leave the country completely, there was an entire group, an entire demographic of older people who just didn't feel like they had any place to go. We decided that we were going to respond to that need as well, to provide a place where they could come together, where they could share their stories and still live life and help participate in helping the needs. It was amazing to watch as this elderly club would not only get together and have their devotionals and their meals together, but decided to start helping out with the children's ministry and the special needs, realizing that they still had something to give to the Great Commission of Christ. This was our safe house that still operates today, our main place where girls who are rescued are able to come and have a place where they can start rebuilding their lives. Another NCM down in the southern part of Romania. When I think about the stories that have come out of here, about kids who have been rescued, I think about 3 women, all rescued within a 2-week time period, all 3 of them pregnant, and all 3 of them delivered within a 2-week time period. I think about what it meant for their families, how difficult the time was as we would go to the safe house and talk to these girls. A lot of times we didn't realize why they were so quick to want to give up their kids until you start hearing their story. Realizing that many of them were children themselves when they got pregnant decided to deliver and realized that they couldn't care for their children. But more importantly, something that we hadn't realized is when they looked down at this brand new newborn baby, that in the face of that child, they often see the face of their trafficker and the re-traumatization that happens. As we began to talk about these girls, as we started to encourage them, we were asked if we would be able to adopt one of those kids, and even though we tried, because of our status there, we weren't able to, and so we began to pour in the life of both mother and son. That son is still with his mother today, as she has since remarried and started a new family of her own, graduating from the program, a testament to what the transformation that God can do in someone's life. There was another mom who struggled, though, a lower functioning mother who knew that she would be unable to care for her son. So it was during COVID that we were asked to take this child into our home. It became very clear early on that he was severely autistic. And because of our status there, we knew that we would be unable to adopt him. So we cared for him during the pandemic while a family could be found for him. We began to pray, would God provide a family for little Vali? It was our church in Bucharest that one of our young ladies, she's in her early 30s, Alexandra, began to pray looking for a Christian husband there in Romania. Per her own testimony, not mine, there are very few Christian men to be found in that country. She said, I don't know if I can wait for a husband. I know that God wants me to be a mother. She began to pray about whether she should be Vali's mom. And it was after the pandemic that she gave us a call and said, I feel like this is the path that God is leading us on. I really feel like I'm supposed to be Vali's mom. What's amazing about that story is that if you go all the way back to Alexandra's history, Alexandra's father was a trafficker. He had an operation there in Bucharest where he would purchase girls from traffickers there and enslave them into his enterprise. He would keep them chained up and locked up there. He was done with work very early in the morning, in a drunken stupor, hobbling back home, just happens upon the Church of the Nazarene in Bucharest, Romania. He walks in as service is just about to begin, and I don't even know how clear his mind was when he walks in, but for the first time he's able to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. And not probably fully understanding what it means at that moment in time, he gives his heart and life to Jesus. Now, Ovidiu, Alexandra's mom, is now a Christian grandfather to a child born out of human trafficking. When you listen to this man talk about his grandson, you can tell that he just fills up with pride. A circle broken because of a relationship with Jesus Christ. Now a family who loves this boy more than life itself, all because of the participation of the Nazarene Church and Nazarene Compassionate Ministries and the Church of the Nazarene in Bucharest, Romania. When you give to Faith Promise, when you participate in the World Evangelism Fund, I need to let you know that I've had conversation with lives that have been absolutely transformed because of your willingness to participate there. Our school has also seen the benefit of the involvement of compassionate ministries there, as these kids have also come from broken homes. I realized that God was calling us off the foreign mission field to come back to a domestic one because I had seen the journey that he had taken me on. Even before we became missionaries, I was the director of a residential treatment facility for violent youth, boys and girls who had been arrested and put into juvenile detention. I ran a group home for boys and a group home for girls where those kids would be brought in and reacclimated back into normal society, whatever that means, put back into public school, reunification with family, if that was the plan. And all of a sudden I started to realize that through that part of my life, and then the work that we had done on the mission field, working with the indigenous populations of the countries where we had lived, and even working in a residential setting, that now this move to come back to the ultimate in indigenous ministry, to be able to work in a residential setting, I began to realize that the kids that we have at the school share very much with the families and the stories that we had heard from the mission field. I think about the stories of the Romanians and the Roma kids. And I think, well, how am I ever going to be able to encounter that again? And yet, now when I go to the school and spend every day with these kids, I begin to hear stories of lives back home. I begin to realize that for many of these kids, their moms and dads are not in the picture. We only have, of all of our student body, we only have one father involved. And he's a cross-country truck driver. We only see him once every 3 months, the only dad involved in the lives of these kids. Most of these kids are dropped off by grandparents, by aunties. I would say about 40% of the kids who were dropped off this year came with nothing. Our 3 most recent students who came this past week came with just the clothes on their back, not even a backpack, dropped off at the school so that we'd be able to take care of them. I want to let you know that your participation in Nazarene Compassionate Ministries isn't just about an offering that you take. We have been able to give more to these kids, so much so that a lot of our kids don't want to go home. Every other weekend, every 11 days, we send them home for the weekend. This is a weekend. They actually come back tonight. They've been gone this past weekend. Many of those kids beg and cry that they don't have to go home. We've had kids ask if they can spend the Christmas break with us when I told them that we were canceling summer school so we could be able to make the renovations necessary on campus. Many of them began to cry and beg that they could stay on our campus. We could brag about that and say, well, what kind of kid wants to stay at school all year round? And yet we realize it's because they know that there's a family that surrounds them, that loves them and cares about them and prays for them. They've also started to realize that our family is much bigger than that. That our family extends to this group right here. That in the Church of the Nazarene and our Nazarene Compassionate Ministry centers, that you are a part of the work that is happening there. I'll also tell you that this is another reason why NCM is so important. I can't tell you stories about the importance of digging wells or potable water in other parts of the world, especially in Africa or in the jungles of South America, because I haven't seen that. But what I can tell you is that on the campus of Native American Christian Academy, this is our African well. That little spigot there is our only potable water on campus. I can tell you that this is why NCM is so important. I've always wondered, as I told these stories and gone from place to place, when I think about all that NCM does, I hear about all these things about the importance of potable water. And living in Europe and even in Central America, it just didn't seem like it was that important because I hadn't been in those areas. And now I realize just how important it is. I will say it is kind of fun to gather together as a community and fill up our large water jugs here and wait in line. It does feel like our African well. But I can see just how important it is to be able to get drinkable water to our dorms, to our classrooms, and then be able to bottle it up and give it to our families who also don't have potable water there on the reservations. Your participation in NCM makes all of this possible. The Jesus film, how many of you guys are familiar with the Jesus film? Anyone participated in it, given to it? We've never really used it there in Europe, as you can probably imagine. But I have had an experience of just how important it is. I was asked, as I graduated from college in 2000 from Olivet Nazarene University, no cheers, that's odd. They really wanted to find college kids who would be able to smuggle in the Jesus film, and they didn't want Indians to do it, and so they figured that they'd find stupid college kids who were willing to put their lives on the line to smuggle in this film. As I loaded up the suitcase full of DVDs there before I took my first flight over to the eastern coast of India, I was told if you get caught with the video, you just need to leave it, and you need to go, and you need to run as fast as you can. And I was always confused because this is only my first time to India. They never told me where I was supposed to run to. But I traveled down the coast finding places where they were going to distribute the film. I walked into one village. I was with another American who was quite a bit older than myself, along with an Indian guide who was from a state in India where the people are quite a bit taller. And so he was almost my height, and the American was too, but all three of us fairly tall. We walk into a village at dusk, and as we walk through the jungle and come onto the village, most of the children begin to scream. Their moms begin to gather them around and put them in the huts that are scattered about. I looked over at our Indian guide and I said, "Can you tell me what this is about?" And he said, "Well, they never leave the village. They've never seen someone who looks like you. They're absolutely terrified, probably think that you're a monster or demon of some kind." We make our way through the village now with not a single soul to be found, and we walk into a random hut there. As we walk in, it's dark inside with just a little lantern there in the center, and I watch as a group of young people they're in the middle of that room, on their knees with their heads all together, praying as loud as they can. I lean over to my Indian friend, And I asked him, what are they doing? He said, actually, they're praying for your safety. They knew that you were coming with the DVD, and they were praying that you would be able to make it, that your suitcase would be full for the tool that they need to be able to show the Jesus film in their communities. After they get done praying, they get up and begin to greet us and welcome us, and they take the suitcase out of my hand and they put it in the center, and I watch as they go right back to that first position, heads together on their knees in the center, and begin to pray just as loudly. I lean over to him once again and I said, what are they doing now? He said, now they're praying for each other, because now the risk is theirs. They're the ones who now have to take this tool, put their lives on the line to be able to go and share it to their communities back home. I began to realize just how important it is that even tools like the Jesus film, how it's being used to be able to share the good news of who Jesus is around the world. Child sponsorship, many of you have probably participated in child sponsorship, and these are some of the pictures of our kids in Sigishwada who are sponsored by people that are there. Even in the town of Sigmanju were these kids. I will tell you that if you sponsor a child in Romania, I have met that child personally. I can also tell you that if you sponsor any children in our church in Sigmanju, not only do your sponsorship dollars go to support that child, but we have made those dollars stretch. If you ever wonder if your sponsorship dollars are actually taking care of the children there, I can tell you that not only did they take care of your child, but we also used that money, stretched it out to take care of many others. There in the town of Sigmanju, we had about 60 kids who were sponsored. We took care of 120 kids in that community. We made sure that anyone who had decided to sponsor a child was making sure that those children were taken care of. We've been able to hand out bowls of soup to those kids, to be able to provide enough food for them to even take home to their families there. I can tell you that even at Native American Christian Academy, that a lot of our kids are sponsored as students. We run our sponsorship program the same way that the Church of the Nazarene does, to make sure that our kids are getting a good education, that they are hearing about Jesus Christ there. And finally, the World Evangelism Fund. I can tell you that all the work that we've been able to do in Guatemala, Spain, Greece, Romania, Italy, and now in the middle of the desert of Sun Valley, Arizona, all of this is possible because of your participation in the World Evangelism Fund. We have watched as there in our congregation in Sigishwada that Romanians and Roma were able to be brought together. As we were able to ordain 5 elders there, take care of our community that's there. I think about what else we've been able to do. It was on this field here in Romania that we were able to do a sports outreach. We knew that it was going to be difficult. Just down the road was a community of Roma Gypsy kids. As I mentioned before, 100% of them had been trafficked. They knew that they were being put on public buses to go into the center of Bucharest to beg. A man in a white van pulls up one day and says, hey, I know that you're sending your kids on these public buses. It's very dangerous. I know that you need the money, that you want them to go to the city center to beg. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, load them up, and I'm going to take them there. I'm going to make sure that they get there safely. So he would pick them up early in the morning, go into Bucharest, bring them back home late at night. It took longer than it should have to realize that he wasn't taking them to the center to beg, that he was taking them to his apartment to film them. We found that 100% of the kids in this town had been victimized. We knew that we needed to do an outreach, and I didn't want to just do it for the Roma. I wanted to do it for the Romanian kids that were in that town as well. So we went to the mayor, and he said, if you want to use this field, you need to go to the principal of the school. It's technically their field. So I went to the principal, and she told me, absolutely not. You can do it for our Romanian kids, for the kids who go to school here, but we know what those kids are about. We know what kind of kids those are. And honestly, we can't mix them together. And I told her, look, this is a non-negotiable for me. If we're going to do it for your kids, and I want your kids to participate, we need to do it for these kids as well. And she said, okay, but just so you know, this is on you. When Romanian and Roma kids get together, it's always violent, and especially with the kids over there, it's going to be violent. And I said, you know what, we're just going to leave this to God. If you'll let me use the field, I'll take care of the rest. I'll take full responsibility for what happens. And wouldn't you know it, that as we share that field, those kids come together. And sure, they might not have always have gotten along, but there were no fistfights, there were no arguments. I watched as they shared that field together. On Thursday of that week, that principal came up to me with tears in her eyes, confessed to me that she is a Christian. asked me if I'd be willing to do the same ministry in her town 20 minutes away. She said, I've never seen a ministry where Roma and Romanian kids can come together in such a peaceful environment, to be able to learn a sport that none of them had ever played before, to more importantly begin to learn about Jesus and pray together as one group. I'd like to see this in other parts. Only possible because of your participation in the World Evangelism Fund. I have many more stories about another field where we did ministry there as well, where lives were transformed by kids, the ones who are often picked out for human trafficking. But then I think about now a whole new group of kids who come from broken families as well, who are struggling in many of the same ways. This place, our courtyard, we are getting ready to transform this area to be a place where all of us come together, to string lights over the top of it, to put in a fire pit where we can gather together, tell stories, and sing songs. When I came to the school, I was told that these kids do not associate with each other, that the Navajo and Apache reservations particularly, that those groups of people, that they don't want to be social, that they don't want to be together, they don't want community, so don't even try. And yet, by my 4th week there, we were able to see that all the kids would gather in this rocky and sandy place just because all of us were there as a family. As we wait for the sun to go down, laughing and playing in this horrible area, we decided that we needed to transform it to a place where all of us can get together, where we can share stories about just how great God is. Here you can see some of our graduates and what we do to bring our kids into a relationship with Christ. I want you to know that this is what participation in Faith Promise in the World Evangelism Fund, it does all of these things. I can tell you just as many stories from Spain, just as many stories from Greece, just as many stories from Italy, of things that I've seen, lives that have been transformed, places that I have lived, places where true ministry has happened. I want you to know that when you give, when you make that commitment to participate, that it isn't just money being sent places, that real life change is happening, that lives are being transformed because of your willingness to participate in Great Commission work. Let's pray. Father, I just want to give you thanks for an opportunity like this where we're able to participate in your kingdom work. And Father, I know that you could do all of this without us, and I can think of many times, even as I tell these stories, I can look back and think of times that I have truly messed up. Times where I could have probably shared the gospel a lot better than I did. Where I could have been an agent of change and maybe just held back a little bit or said, maybe this isn't my place. And yet you have continued to call me. And I think about every person here that you have asked to be a part of this work. I don't know why you don't just do it yourself, because you would do it so much better. I don't know why you call us and use us, but I'm glad you do. That you have invited us to be co-workers with you. And so, Father, this morning, as we have this opportunity to give, I pray that we would remember what it is that our body of Christ does around the world. That we would think about the ministries that are funded, about the children who are sponsored, about the videos that are shown, about the projects that are done with our hands, the buildings that are built because of the change in our pockets. All of these things that we're able to be a part of are leading to followers of you. I think about right now, just a few hours ago, services that were held in Spanish and Italian, in Greek, in Romanian, by leaders that were affected because of giving that happened from this church. Pastors, national missionaries, ministries that are being done on the ground because of the faithful giving of churches just like this one. Father, I pray that you would remind them daily as they kneel before you and pray about how they can get involved in local ministries, that you would also remind them of how their giving has led to life change around the world. that they have truly participated in Great Commission work. That days just like this one are a celebration of your faithfulness to us and our faithfulness back to you. The money we give, the offerings that we give, the pledges that we make, those are yours already. Those are resources you've already given to us. So we just take a small portion of that to say we want your work to continue while we continue to be the hands and feet in our Jerusalem and our Judea, and maybe over in Sun Valley and our Samaria. That for those of us who can't go to the ends of the earth, this is our participation in that part of ministry. I pray that whoever gives would be blessed immeasurably more. I know they have already because of everything that you've given to us. So right now we give back to you. We love you, knowing that you first loved us. And we pray this in your name.